Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our wonderful Writers in Our Midst event, number 16, I believe we are at, which is very exciting. We have a wonderful evening of local authors focusing on mystery and crime, I believe, doing some readings tonight, and we are very excited to have all of them here for this event. During the event, if you do have any questions or any comments, feel free to put them into the comment section on the live video. If you are watching this later as well, we'd always love to hear your comments. And if you do have any questions, we can try and get them answered after the fact as well. So on that note, I am going to pass this over to our wonderful host, who is actually doing double duty tonight as a host, and I believe he's doing a reading as well tonight. So I'm going to pass it over to Eric so that he can introduce the authors and the event. Have a great night and enjoy the readings.
Thank you very much, Sadie. As she said, my name is Eric de Souza. I'm the host of Writers in Our Midst. We tried something new last time of having themes for our readings, and it was quite successful. It was a children's event that we did in September, sort of a back-to-school event. And the library graciously hosted us, just as they've done before. They used to do it in person. We've shifted to online for now, and it seemed to be quite a good success. So this is our second version, but we're doing something pretty much completely different, from children to crime and mysteries. I think we all even have dark backlit backgrounds to make it eerie. So I've got some great writers for us today. By chance, they all are members of Crime Writers of Canada. 4 out of 6 are residents of Port Moody, but I'll let you guess which ones. And they're all my friends and great writers. So it's my honor to introduce everybody. As Sadie said, I am going to actually read for the first time at one of these events. So I'm going to introduce myself. So Eric de Souza is a writer living in Port Moody, and I'm also a editor, publisher, and promoter of BC literary scene. My first, well, Death in Half Moon Bay isn't my first book. It is the third book that I've published, but it's the first book that I could say is wholesome. I've been writing for a few years now, and what's happened is, well, basically my kids go to school and I meet new parents and they're like, hey, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I'm a writer. And they say, oh, what do you write? And I'm like, it's memoir, and deals with perhaps some adult issues. And they're like, oh, could I read it? And I'm like, oh, maybe not, because your kids come over for play dates and stuff, and if you read my books, perhaps you're not going to be so inclined to bring your kids over to my place. So I shifted gears, went into something completely different, and I've always been in love with the mystery genre. I grew up not only reading mysteries, but also watching mysteries. It was a strong kinship I had with my mother. We used to watch all the Sherlock Holmes and Agatha Christie's, and we loved the BBC shows. So we loved those mysteries and the whodunits. So I always thought, hey, it would be a great idea. Why don't I write one? And I was sort of mulling that idea over in my head and reading different genres. This is more of the cozy genre, the modern cozies. And I thought, no, maybe I'm going to write more of a traditional whodunit with some of the old elements of Agatha Christie. And I was trying to think of a great main character. And then I pretty much decided, well, I'm writing this for my mom. What if, and many great novels kind of start with the author asking themselves, what if, and in my case, it was, what if my parents had a fight with their strata president, and that led to a murder? Basically, that idea just spun in my head for a while, and I've been writing it for a few years. Finally, have the last draft out. It's actually doing quite well on Amazon, and I'm quite happy about it. And today I'm going to read to you Chapter 1 of Death in Half Moon Bay. Suzanne's troubled thoughts were interrupted by a siren. It was still in the distance, yet very distinct. It was an ambulance, she was sure of it. Suzanne put down her needlepoint and noted the time, 11:24 p.m. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She focused on every sound, blocking out her husband snoring from upstairs and tracking the ambulance as it turned off the highway along Mercer Road. She hoped it would pass by her retirement community and continue towards the marina, but no such luck. The ambulance turned onto her street and roared past her townhome. It traveled deeper into the heart of the complex. After a few moments, everything became eerily silent. She strained her ears to hear more, but couldn't. Her imagination was awash with only dire possibilities. Someone she knew was either dead or dying. Suzanne rose from her favorite armchair and tightened her mauve dressing gown around her waist. She climbed her stairs to the best vantage point in their home, a large bay window that peered into the hamlet. Nero, their 9-year-old French bulldog, met her there and remained quiet and obedient. He looked as if he was fighting the instincts to bark at the outside racket, but his training had taught him otherwise. He resorted to the short snort. The ambulance had turned the corner into a newer section of the community. Its lights danced off the windows of their townhomes. Maybe Regina had a stroke. It was a sinful wish, but Suzanne couldn't help it. At least now she'd have something to confess to Father O'Brien. Next Sunday. But alas, it was unlikely. If only the good die young, then Regina Snow was destined to live to be 100. There was no point in staying inside and worrying. She traipsed into her bathroom and put in her teeth. Her younger self would have wanted to apply makeup and brush her hair, but she was far past such vanities. The only question in her mind was whether to wake her husband, Charles. If she left without telling him, and he woke up inexplainably alone, he'd probably have a heart attack, and then they'd need another ambulance. Nero followed her as she returned to the window, and he remained by her feet as she pondered the situation. Why not blame the dog? Nero, speak! She didn't have to ask twice. Without hesitation, Nero complied. Ruff, ruff! Just as expected, she heard Charles say, What? What is it, boy? A few moments later, he asked, Honey, where are you? An ambulance just pulled in and went around the corner. Suzanne walked into her bedroom and gripped Charles's shoulder. It's probably nothing. Come to bed. Ambulances don't come for nothing. Charles turned onto his side. We could look into it in the morning. You better get some rest now. Only you could sleep under these circumstances. It's 11:30 at night, Suzanne. It's probably natural to be asleep under these circumstances. Charles's logic had always annoyed her. His brain was wired differently from hers. She had accepted that. He needed his sleep, and barring an absolute emergency, Charles would not be getting out of bed. Nero and I are going for a stroll. Suit yourself. Charles rolled onto his stomach and was asleep almost instantly. Without another word, she went downstairs, put on her warmest jacket, grabbed her cane, and along with Nero, went out to investigate. The air was cold and damp. It'll rain again tomorrow, maybe even snow, Suzanne thought. Nero splashed through the puddles. He was visibly excited to be out for such a late-night walk. As they approached the corner of the street, she heard a commotion. Many of the residents were outside, imparting worried glances between themselves. The ambulance was parked in front of Adelaine's home. Her door was wide open. Adeline wouldn't like that. She hates wasting energy, Suzanne thought. She spotted her closest friends, Connie and Ivan, huddled together near the front of the onlookers. Suzanne squeezed her way through and asked them, What's happening? We don't know, Ivan said. Connie's eyes were full of tears and dread. She held a tissue close to her face. Two paramedics emerged from the doorway. Lan, Adelaine's best friend, stood beside them. They were hauling Adeline in a gurney into the back of their vehicle. An oxygen mask was strapped around her mouth. Small blessing, Suzanne thought. At least she's still alive. And that's chapter 1. I did want to say, before I continue, a very big thank you to the Port Moody Writers Group. The first chapter is always the hardest, so I worked this one out over and over and again with them. They've probably heard it many, many times. And also the Off the Page Writers Group, where we practice reading. I brought this piece to them many, many times. So I thank you, but also I apologize if any of you, or if my friends are here listening to chapter 1 again. I apologize, you've heard it so many times. But as I said, the book's at the printers, so hopefully very soon I'll be able to get you a copy. So that's my reading, and let me just bring on our host again. Hello, everyone. Mute's back? Are mute's back off?
Yeah. Yep.
Great. So let's get to our second reader. So W.L. Hawkins, or can I call you Wendy here?
Sure.
Wendy writes edgy fantasy and a twist of murder. Our Hollystone mysteries follow a coven of West Coast witches who solve murders using ritual and magic. Basically, I've read a few of her stories. She's an old friend at this point. Her books are always, as she says, edgy. She's actually, I didn't make you promise this time, but I'm sure she's going to not make it so edgy for this family affair. So, Wendy L. Hawkins.
You could say sexy if you want instead of edgy, and I'm perfectly fine with that. I don't have a problem with that. Okay, I'm actually going to read tonight from To Render a Raven, which is book 3 in the Hollystone Mysteries. If you're curious at all about the Hollystone Mysteries, To Charm a Killer is up free right now, the ebook, and doing really well as a free ebook because we love free things. So if you just want to have a look at it, you can pop into Amazon or wherever you go to your retailer and have a look. So this is book 3. And since it's mystery and suspense night, I'm going to talk about the crime a little bit. Estrada drove Michael's BMW as far as his Commercial Drive flat, and then drove his Harley out to Bunsen Lake with Dove on the back. He needed to feel his fists on the throttle. He opened her up as they hit the freeway, and the cool fierceness of the wind fired his senses. He knew the calm normalcy of the past year was just a mirage, and his world was imploding. He could taste it, a kind of bitter acid that coated his dry mouth. At the summit of the hill above Bunsen Lake, the ashes of a million blackened trees sullied the usually fresh mountain air. Forest fires. One more thing he couldn't control. Estrada pressed the throttle, wanted to punch something, and then they were there, and he knew for everyone's sake he could not. Dove slipped off the back of the bike and coughed as he wrenched off his helmet. Is that wood smoke? I didn't notice that yesterday. Winds changed direction. Estrada's lip trembled. Every summer, more forests burn. Taking a step back, Dove touched his hand to his heart and his jaw fell. At noon, the air rippled with heat and the blue-gray haze of tragedy. The house on Hawksclaw Lane, a house Estrada had come to love, looked surreal with a police cruiser and a forensic investigation van parked in the driveway. The forest fires engulfing them were tragic, but all he could think about was Lucy. Seeing police vehicles made her abduction real. He banged on the door and then opened it with his key, one of the benefits of being a father. A wiggly black Labrador retriever jumped him. He bent forward to steady the beast as Sincera slid down the stairs in a thin black t-shirt dress. Her hair was caught back, her feet bare. She grasped his shoulders and stared, her brown irises flaring wet like molten rock. You all right, Sarah? She shook her head, then buried her face in his chest and clung to him. Estrada wrapped his arms around her, held her, and waited. He didn't want to inflict any more pain, but there were things he needed to know. Tell me, how did... Stolen from her crib. Someone broke in? He ground his teeth, every muscle taut. He wanted to punch a wall or a face, but couldn't. Sarah needed him to step up, be the man, find their child. I left her window open. It was so hot. Stepping back, she grasped her temples as tears dripped down her cheeks. We should have bought an air conditioner. I just hate air conditioners. And now the smoke. This is not your fault, Sarah. Whoever took Lucy didn't come in her window. No one could scale that wall. It's too high. He clenched his fists until his fingernails bit into his palms. The tension taunting the back of his neck spiraled into his scalp. His headache, he wanted to get drunk, to do anything but stand here and talk about his child's abduction. But the doors were all locked, Sarah said. Estrada could see the tight muscles in her neck jumping under her skin. He laid his clammy hands against her neck and shoulders and squeezed until she squealed from the pressure. Sorry, he said, shaking his head. I'm just trying to. I know. She touched his cheek and stared into his eyes. And I know how hard this is for you. We'll find her, Sarah, but I need to know everything. Estrada glanced down as the black lad settled against his ankles. What about Remy? Didn't he bark? She shook her head. No one heard him. That's weird. Remy loved everyone, but barked ballistically whenever a stranger came near the house. Maybe the kidnapper brought steak, he thought. But how could anyone get into Lucy's bedroom without going upstairs? What about that tree? Could he have climbed it and swung over? Cran Baja? That's impossible. Dove had been standing silently behind them, watching and listening. You sure she didn't just climb out of her crib and hide? Estrada asked. She's agile and you know how she likes to play teak. Peekaboo was one of her favorite games, a baby version of hide and seek. Did you look? Of course I looked, she yelled and stamped her foot. We all did. I can't feel her. Sarah's confession elicited more sobbing. Not here, not anywhere. Estrada gathered her in as she collapsed in his arm. That doesn't mean. He caught himself before the word dead tumbled out. You're just in shock. A professional psychic, Sarah was often called on by police to help with criminal investigations. She'd found several missing kids, but how could she find her own? Or was she too close, too emotional? The bracelet, Dove said. Was she wearing it? Sarah buried her face in Estrada's shoulder and wouldn't look at Dove. Daphne appeared beside Sarah and rubbed her bare arm. We thought she might roll on it and hurt herself when she was asleep. She bit her lip to hold back tears. Rain wandered in from the kitchen and slung a protective arm around Daphne. These three were as formidable as Macbeth's witches when riled. You took it off? Dove was indignant and not about to let it go. Sarah stepped back, breaking Estrada's embrace. Well, it sat on her dresser all night and it didn't keep the monster from creeping in and stealing her, did it? It was magicked to protect the wearer, not to keep some demon from entering the premises. I told you. Estrada raised his hand. Stop talking about monsters and demons. Sorry, mate, Dove said. We need to sit down and figure this out. Daphne and Rain locked arms with Sarah and led her into the living room, and the men followed in their wake. I'll put the kettle on, Daphne said, after the women deposited Sarah on the couch. Who has time for tea? Estrada couldn't sit still and was bouncing on the balls of his feet, smacking his fist into his palm. What else can we do? The police are upstairs taking the place apart. What aren't you telling me, Sarah? Estrada's skin had been prickling since he walked in, and his feelings of trepidation weren't coming from the energies in the house, but from the women. They were hiding something. Did the kidnapper call or leave a note or something? Sarah glanced at Rain and bit her trembling lip as Daphne reappeared. What is it? And don't mess with me. We found a rose, Daphne said. Estrada's eyes widened. Where? In her crib. Estrada turned and slammed his fist into the wall. Then leaning over, he clutched his bruised and bleeding knuckles. What? Sarah sprung to her feet. What do you know? It was red, wasn't it? A red rose. Sitting back, Daphne nodded. Collapsing on the floor, Estrada caught his head in his hands. Though his mind was spinning, he couldn't find words. The thought of Ruby's murderers taking his baby was just too much. And then he remembered Nigel's description of the man who'd broken both his legs and a pain cut through his gut. We've had an eventful evening ourselves, Dove said. Someone is playing a cruel game. Explain, Daphne said. When we arrived back at the Stryker home last night, we discovered a murdered woman on the steps in front of Michael's door. Murdered? Sincera took a quick breath. Who? Someone you knew? Estrada stared down at the floor. Ruby Carvello, Nigel Stryker's mistress. Sincera stared at him confused. Of course she wasn't privy to this side of his life. It was the stuff he kept hidden. Nigel is Michael's grandfather, but he raised him, and Ruby, well, she was like a mother to Michael. A mother murdered on Michael's steps? I knew that. The point is, Dove said, interrupting her, the woman was posed with a red rose across her heart. Estrada climbed to his knees and caught Sincera's moist hands in his, but she pulled away and crossed her arms over her chest. Sitting back on the floor, he took a deep breath. Then we discovered the woman next door was missing. She was taken from her child's room on the upper floor, the same as, oh my God, Daphne said. A red rose was left on the windowsill, concluded Dove. Sincera's eyes widened. They're connected. Yes, by 3 red roses. Estrada's mind raced with all the things a red rose could represent. Passion, love, sacrifice. But how, Daphne asked. Michael Stryker, Sincera said, rising like a whirling cobra. We don't know that, Estrada said defensively. His doorstep, his neighbors, and he was here yesterday with Lucy. Where is he now?
Well, they solved the murder.
No, they didn't. That doesn't happen. No. This is actually a thriller. Yeah.
Oh. Not sure if one of our audio. Oh, there we go. It's better. You were walking that line. I was like, oh, Sadie might cut her off. You made it. It's not used to like the videos they put on the Port Moody Library story time. So I've known Seamus a few years. So Seamus Hefferman, he writes the Thaddeus Grail detective novel series. He's got a darker past in politics, unfortunately, but he's doing something far more wholesome now in writing murder mysteries. And I know you said you're starting to work on your 3rd book, but I've had a pleasure of reading your first 2. I'm not sure which one you're reading right now, but I can tell everyone his first book, Napalm Hearts, it's a masterpiece. Second one's good too, but Napalm Hearts is brilliant. So
I feel bad about
Seamus
this
Hefferman,
because I'm actually reading for my 2nd book, the less than But if you're watching this and can stomach both of them, they're of course presently available on Amazon, and you'll see that this is I'd say roughly stocking sized. Just throwing that out there. And yes, I did used to work in politics, although I prefer the moniker public service. It's much less derogatory. Thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in this evening. I'll be reading from my 2nd book, 10 Grand. The chapter I've chosen to read, I've done before in previous readings, and it really is just because I like it. It's 2 characters who I very much enjoy. I like the banter, the quick rat-a-tat of the dialogue. One of the great tropes of mystery and detective fiction is that your protagonist needs to have some contacts or sources to the underworld into which he must navigate. And my detective, Mr. Thaddeus Grail, is no different. This part of the story takes place when he goes to visit an old friend who runs a bar in the East End of London, who is involved in some shady dealings. And so, without any further ramblings, Chapter 9 of 10 Grand. Even though it had been over a year since I had stopped into the Bell's pub in the East End, as I pulled out a stool at the bar, the governor there recognized me quickly, if a bit begrudgingly. Grail, Shane Bowring said, shooing away the other barman and making his way down to re-explore our acquaintance. Well, what's going on, detective man? Bowring had helped me out on another case after I first threatened him and then bribed him. Obviously, I'm not great at making friends, but we had left it in an okay place. Still, we didn't send each other Christmas cards or anything. I extended my hand as a declaration of peaceful intent. Bowering accepted it with only the polite amount of amusement and disdain. Diet Coke, he asked. You do remember your punters, I said. Imagine if I became a regular. There's not enough fountain soda in London to make it worth either our while, he said. He handed me a pint slammed to the brim with dark cola and ice. I took a tentative sip, then put my finger to my throat. Still alive, I said. Strychnine doesn't get in until next Monday, he replied. So, what's up? Can we talk privately? Bowering told the other bartender, a young guy with stovepipe black jeans and a beard struggling somewhere between scruff and aspirational, to take 10, then made a sweep of the bar with his arm. We were, save for the cigarette burns in the seats and the yellowing posters and chipped frames, now alone. He leaned forward, resting his log-like forearms on the bar and bringing himself to my eyeline. Okay then, he said. I could smell the cheap gel in his brush-cut hair as the head loomed close to mine. Let's talk. You still taking bets? A man's got to make a living, he said. I'm trying to track a guy down. He's in the same line of work as you. A buddy of mine owes him a lot of money. I need to arrange a payment plan. Well, first, I wouldn't say it like that, he said. You're not meeting with some bank teller trying to get a better mortgage rate here. You know what I mean, I said. I do. I've had the pleasure of talking with you before, but maybe try not to sound like a professor all the time. It might work out for you, Grail. Thanks for the advice, I said, but I come by it a bit too honestly. My mom gave me lots of books when I was a kid. Let me guess. They were your friends when things were tough. Things were tough a lot, I said. They still are. So are you going to help me or not? Bowering chuckled, not unkindly. Sure. What the hell? Who's the guy? Alphonse Quigley, I said. Bowering topped up my Coke. Your friend's into that mad Irishman? He must be desperate. If you mean he was drowning in debt, made a lot of bad choices, and had nowhere else to go, then yeah, desperate pretty much covers it, I said. I know Alphonse. I got a number for one or two of his leg men. My guys have helped him once or twice, but you'd probably be better off seeing him in person. Where is he? Well, it's not like he's got office space in the Mile, Bowering said, but I know a few places he hangs out. I got out my notebook. Your best bet's this curry house he hits most Fridays. Place called the Empress, Bowering said. Last I heard, he and his crew book out the room in the back. Can you reach out? Let him know I'm coming, I asked. He shook his head. I know the guy, but not like that. The first steps, you're on your own. Roger that, I said. I pulled out my phone and looked up the Empress's address, adding it to my notes. Get there early, he advised, between the 5th or 4th round of Cobras. Anything else I should know? Yeah, he said. Don't be a smart arse. This guy's not messing around. He won't be as impressed with your business card or dry wit. You were impressed, I asked. I was patient, Grail, Bowering said. Very, very patient. Plus, you gave me money, and that smooths over a lot of cracks. That I did. Speaking of, I mimed reaching for my back pocket. Bowering shook his head. No money. Well, that's refreshing, I said. I'm pleased with your sense of community service. Bowering shrugged. What can I say? You got to give back. Plus, if I'm being honest, I need a favor too. Oh yeah? What's on your mind? Bowering curled one hand's thick fingers around the back of his neck and began kneading. I need you to run a check on somebody in my employ, he said. Sure, I said. How deep you looking for? The basics like credit rating and the last couple of jobs? Or are we talking the all-out, unabridged Russian novel? How long for the full war and peace, he asked. Could be weeks, but months more likely. What can you get me in a week? Well, I'm going to have to firm it out. I'm up to my hips in this and another case, but I know someone. She's new, but she's good. She can find out a lot, but I can't guarantee you the results on a strict timeline. Some people are open books because they don't really have anything to find. Others are good at picking up all the breadcrumbs. You trust this person, he asked? Oh, yeah, absolutely. Bowering considered this. What he was really wondering was if he could trust me. Okay, he said. 1 week, and we're square. We shook hands again. Who's your area of concern, I asked. He flicked his head towards the entrance, where his colleague had left after being dismissed. That guy, he said. His name's Tom's Raynot. He came on a few weeks back. What, the kid? What's the problem? Nothing. He seems okay. He's a good bartender. But I need to pick up a few guys for some other stuff, and I don't know enough about him to, bring him in. He pulled an accordion box from under the bar, rifled through it, and handed me Raynot's response, plus a pay stub with his national insurance number. I gave it all a quick once-over. You should pay people more, I said. He does great with tips. Look, can you help or not? I laughed. Relax, man. I'm messing with you. Yes, I said I can help. Bowering worked his neck a bit more. He obviously wasn't used to dealing with outside contractors, or asking anyone for help at all, I would imagine. I can get you something, I said, attempting to appease, but the stuff you're looking for help with, the kid is clean. Is this going to get him in trouble? Bahrain considered his response for a moment before giving it. He can always say no. Fair enough, I said, stuffing the papers into my jacket. Anything else? Yes, he said, pulling back from the bar and assuming his full height and width. Mine is a trust-based enterprise. That's why I need to know the kid's all right. It's also why I don't feel great letting you poke around in my business. It's in my interest to do this and keep you... It's in my interest to do this and do it well, I said. You're a good source to have. Let's keep it that way. Like I said, I know Alphonse, and I know the guys he used to express his disappointment. I know they're always looking for the extra work. You're threatening me, I asked, mock horrified. I would think that was beneath you. It's important to have clear boundaries, he said, grabbing a towel and getting to work on some wet highball glasses. And I like to keep all my relationships uncomplicated, especially the business ones. Oh, then trust me to do my job, I said, standing. Christ, I barely trust you at all, he said. So go win me over, will you?
All right, I'm going to go read 10 grand again.
You did give it unfair short shrift, I think, yeah.
I should mention at this point, Seamus, I'm going to have to pressure you a little bit to get your books into the White Pines collection of the Port Moody Library, now that you're in the hood.
Yeah, absolutely.
The library's a great resource to help promote local authors, so I'll tell you all about the White Pines program.
I don't know if I'm allowed back at the library after an embarrassing incident with my son.
From last time?
Yeah. I don't know if I told you that story, but my son had a horrible bathroom-related incident there, and it's the closest I've ever come to faking my death and assuming a false identity. So the worst part is my son is 15 months old. My partner brings him over now to pick up books, and they've never met her, but they say, "Oh, hello, we remember James very well." So.
It's important to build a reputation.
Scatological or not, yes, I agree.
So I mentioned earlier, I'm a member of the Port Moody Writers Group. It's my honor to bring on one of the professors, could be a professor, one of the instructors at the group. Every time she was a sub and was going to be my teacher, I'd quickly write some mystery because she was one of the reasons why I wrote a mystery. So it's my pleasure to bring on one of my favorite writers, Deborah Purdykong.
Thank you, Eric. Hi, everybody, and thank you to Sadie and the Port Moody Library for hosting this event tonight. It's really a pleasure to be here. So I'm going to read from my latest, installment in the book. This is number 6 in the Casey Holland series. Casey Holland is a undercover security officer for a fictional bus company that I created. And Casey spends her days and her nights dealing with smaller crimes on the buses that either evolve into or merge with other things that are going on in the city. I'm going to read from part of chapter 2 tonight. Chapter 1 takes place in the middle of a riot, and there's a bit of violence and a lot of swearing. And because this is a family-friendly event, we're not going to go there tonight. So chapter 2 is dealing with the aftermath of some things that have happened at the riot. Casey had been caught on the bus in the middle of the event, and with a driver named Wesley who didn't handle things too well. Her fiance, Lou, whom she lives with, was driving a bus at the origin of where the riot actually started, and she's been really worried for him. So in this scene, it's late at night. She's waiting for him to come home and busy working on notes for her report the next day. Casey closed the laptop and was drinking the last of her chamomile tea when Lou opened the door and trudged inside. Sliding the laptop off her leg, she got to her feet. Relief swept through her, and she grinned at the way his thick brown hair stuck out in all directions, as if gelled without the benefit of a mirror. The beer stench on his damp-looking hoodie caught her up short. Good Lord, she crinkled her nose. How many beer were dumped on you? Dunno. A few, I guess. He lifted the hoodie over his head. You didn't have to wait up. I wanted to. The circles under his gray eyes were expected. The dark red mark on his right cheek was not. Did somebody hit you? There was a fair bit of punching going on. Why didn't you tell me on the phone? You already sounded anxious. Lou groaned as he sat on the sofa, didn't want to make it worse. How much had he kept from her? Is Mitch's wife okay? Yeah, there's no major damage to her eye. Glad I had my truck. They took the bus to the rally and an ambulance would have taken too long. He sighed. Emergency room was so packed that people were sitting on the floor. Casey sat next to him. What exactly happened out there? Some jerks started a bonfire next to the bleachers, Lou said. When the cops showed up, the jerks threw alcohol on the flames, and that's when things really went off the rails. Shifting his weight, Lou grimaced. By the time the firefighters arrived, there were fistfights and people getting hurt. Different groups of guys seemed to have issues with one another. Some assholes were just out to create chaos for fun. It was gross. Lou slowly sat forward, resting his elbows on his knees. As his t-shirt rose up, Casey spotted a large red welt on the right side of his lower back. You were struck on your back, too? Probably. Gave as good as I got, though. He kept his head lowered. I'll be fine. An uneasy feeling wriggled through Casey. At 5'9", Lou wasn't a large man, but regular gym workouts had made him lean and strong. He also knew how to fight. Something told her that tonight's brawl was nastier than he wanted to admit. Did a doctor take a look at you? No, plenty of people were worse off than me. You should go tomorrow. Tomorrow's Sunday. We'll see how I feel on Monday. Casey didn't like it. She saw how pale he was beneath the spray of freckles. Lou, are you sure? Did you see the guy who was stabbed to death on Glen Drive? He turned to her. Must have happened right near you. Heard it on the news while driving home. What stabbing? Nothing was said on the 11 o'clock news. I turned the TV off after that. It happened around 7. Suspect's not been caught. Images flashed through Casey's brain. I saw a man being beaten for trying to stop people from looting his store, but I didn't notice anyone with a knife. She picked up her now fully charged phone and scrolled through the videos she'd taken. Witnesses described someone in a black hoodie and ball cap who'd been behind the victim. Tons of guys were wearing that. Wesley tussled with a few of them. She had no doubt that the bandana boys would have brandished a knife if they'd had one. Wes doesn't tussle, he pulverizes, Lou remarked. What happened? Too exhausted to provide a detailed account, she gave him the abridged version. What was he thinking? Lou responded. Someone was killed tonight and Wes was daring strangers onto the bus? I'm not sure anyone had died at that point, and you know Wes can't be calmed down when he's riled up. He's lucky nobody came at him with a knife. Casey continued reviewing her videos until she reached the final one she took as they were leaving the area. Oh, in the top right corner of her screen, she saw the man fall. For 1 second, she glimpsed a figure in dark clothing right behind him. She remembered losing sight of him when Wes made the turn onto Pacific. Has she recorded a murder? What is it? Lou asked. Take a look at this. Casey handed him the phone. Keep your eye on the top right corner. Lou squinted at the tiny image. Can't see much except for a guy falling. It could be him, or not. As Lou got to his feet, he grunted. You okay? Yeah, just need a shower and some sleep. If you start peeing blood, we're going to the hospital. Lou shuffled toward the bedroom and shut the door, something he rarely did. Did he not want her to see the extent of his injuries? Sooner or later, she'd find out. For the moment, backing off seemed smarter. Lou was a patient man, but even he had his limits. Sighing, Casey rose and turned out the lights. She entered their bedroom, her body aching from the long night. She climbed into bed and reached over to switch on the red lava lamp on Lou's night table. It didn't provide much illumination, but he loved his lava lamp collection that was sprinkled throughout their apartment. Casey switched off her own light and closed her eyes. By the time Lou emerged from the bathroom, she was drowsy. He grunted as he slid into bed. All right, she mumbled. Yeah. Have you seen Summer tonight? She's staying over at Stacy's. Why? Thought I saw her at the rally late this afternoon. She paused. She was too far away to be sure, though. Union rallies wouldn't hold much appeal for her teenaged ward. After quitting the swim team a while back, Summer was more interested in cooking, fashion, and France. Doubt she knows anyone from Coquitlam, Casey mumbled. We've hardly seen her lately. True. It was easy to miss someone in a house with 3 floors and a basement, especially when Summer's room was 1 floor below theirs. Casey didn't often see the 2 university students who rented rooms at the back of the house either. Although she passed by Summer's door every day, their schedules often didn't mesh. She'd make a point of catching up with her tomorrow. Lou shifted his weight and again grunted. I'm worried about you, she said. It's just a few bruises, he murmured. I'll be in good shape for our wedding next month. Don't worry. Easier said than done. Their late June wedding was 6 weeks away. She hadn't forgotten that it was supposed to have taken place last August, but she'd been hospitalized after a maniac attacked her. Their subsequent October date hadn't panned out either when Lou came down with the worst flu of his life. As far as Casey was concerned, this 3rd attempt would happen no matter what. That's the end of that chapter.
Well done, Deborah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I read that book right when the pandemic was coming out. So
Actually, the book release, now that you mention it, was about just 4 weeks before we all got shut down. So, yeah, I sort of just got in there. So, yeah. Seems like a long time.
This is how we do our readings now. I was going to tell everybody, this book, a lot happens in Coquitlam, right? It's one
I
of the
should
major
say,
settings. The riots in
for
Coquitlam.
those who don't know this area, Coquitlam is a suburb of Vancouver. It's about 25-30-minute drive east of Vancouver, and just a few minutes actually from where I live. So a lot of our readers tonight probably know Lafarge Park and Glen Drive and some of the streets that I mentioned in the book quite well. So. Yeah.
The mean streets of Coquitlam. But I say that, but I know in your second book you kill off a lot of people in Port Moody too. So
yeah.
I think it's different communities in all your books,
cover
right?
each municipality as with every book or other books. And now that my daughter lives out in Ladner, I hope to set some scenes out there too. So.
Nowhere is safe. So AJ is a very good friend of mine. He actually lives a couple blocks away. Our kids went to school together for a bit. We've had a few beers in our backyard during the pandemic.
More than a few.
When we were allowed to. Not anymore, but when we were allowed to.
When we were allowed to.
And I mentioned the Crime Writers of Canada. AJ won the best first crime novel 2019 last year. And I know his second book is going to be up for many, many awards, and I can't wait. It's a great book, and I'm not sure which one he's going to read from today, but my friend AJ Devlin.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you, Sadie and Port Moody Library. It's always a fun treat to do an event with Pummel Library and writers in our midst. I'm going to read from book 2, Rolling Thunder. I'm just going to read a brief chapter. And usually I read chapter 1, but it's quite long. But just to set up the chapter, my main character is an ex-professional wrestler turned private detective in Vancouver. And the premise of this book is he's hired by a women's roller derby team whose coach goes missing right before playoffs. And they're nervous to enter playoffs with their coach, so they hire this PI, and he starts looking into the case. And while tracking down, following the clues and tracking down this missing roller derby coach, he finds out that the roller derby coach was quite the gambler. And as a result, he has a bookie. And one of sort of the subplots throughout the book is that he keeps, my detective, Hammerhead Jed Ounstead, he keeps rubbing elbows with this bookie in an effort to find, to make an effort to get closer to finding out where this roller derby coach may be. And so yeah. So anyways, the other thing is the roller derby the bookie is a very upscale, peculiar gentleman, and he has a yen for racing Dachshunds, and this is a real life thing at Hastings Racecourse, where every spring they have wiener dog races, and that's why I'm wearing my my wiener dog tie tonight, as you can see, Dachshund tie. And I was hoping to wear this at like a Chapters or something for a book signing, but c'est la vie. Anyways, so that's the gist of this chapter. Is he keeps running errands for this bookie in hopes of tracking down this roller derby coach. And so, without any further ado, this is chapter 8 of Rolling Thunder, and the name of the wiener dog is Napoleon. Napoleon was taking a dump. I had never seen a wiener dog poop before, and due to the Dachshund's elongated torso, I guess I assumed its waist would be long and thin. Instead, Napoleon stared at me directly in the eyes as he proudly excreted a soft, swirling, triangle-shaped turd that was so perfectly formed, all it was missing to make it look exactly like the poop emoji was a pair of googly eyes and a grin. "Very well, Napoleon," said Sykes. "Return to your mark." Napoleon heeded his master's command and scampered off the green artificial turf and back onto the red oval track at Simon Fraser University's Terry Fox Field. Sykes remained seated in his deluxe lawn chair and made no motion to clean up the dog poop. The little pooch stopped on the white start line, then slowly lowered himself into his stance. Sykes ready to stopwatch in his hand before raising a starter's pistol above his head and firing. The second the diminutive Dachshund heard the shot, he took off like a bolt of lightning, rocketing down the track until he crossed the 100-meter mark. Sykes clicked the stopwatch, checked the time, and then nodded approvingly before whistling with his fingers, summoning Napoleon back toward him. "He's pretty fast," I commented. "Napoleon is just warming up," replied Sykes. "He's still working up to his top speed." The speedy hound made it back to his mark and lowered himself into his stance again. Sykes fired off another shot of the gun, and Napoleon darted off even faster than before. A women's soccer team funneled out of an exterior cement hallway and took to the field, but Sykes was so focused on Napoleon sprinting, he paid them no mind. One of the soccer players stepped on Napoleon's still steaming deposit as she jogged by. However, when she turned to reprimand us, she immediately bit her tongue upon seeing Sykes. Instead, the soiled-shoed soccer player simply lowered her head, did her best to scrape off the feces from her cleats, and then joined her teammates. I still didn't know a lot about Sykes, but one thing was for sure. The man clearly had some clout. "Pretty nice digs for training a dog," I said. "Training a champion," said Sykes, correcting me. Having had my fill of wiener dog race training for the day, I dug in my pockets and retrieved Forrester's $4,200, while Napoleon trotted slowly but confidently back toward his master. "Here you go." For the first time since I had arrived at the track, Sykes made eye contact with me. "Well done, Mr. Ounstead. I am curious, did procuring this debt cause you much trouble?" he asked, as he took the elastic-wrapped wad of bills and tucked them inside the pocket of his tan blazer. "A little bit," I replied. Sykes smiled. "From what I know of the venue that you visited, that is a small price to pay." "The burner number, Sykes," I said, having grown impatient with the pleasantries. "Yes, of course." Sykes slipped a hand into his blazer's breast pocket and slipped me a post-it note with a 778 area code phone number written in impeccable penmanship. "Tread lightly, Mr. Ounstead. I am not certain what kind of trouble Mr. Kunstlinger may be in, but I can say that I have never known him to be so nervous. A single call may be all that you get. But if I speak to him and he tosses the burner, won't he just buy another to get in touch with you and place more bets?" I asked. "Most likely," said Sykes with a smile, as Napoleon sidled up to him for a well-deserved scratch behind the ears and a gourmet dog treat. "Which means you could give me the number again," I continued. Sykes stole a moment away from praising his precious pup to glance up at me. As if on command, his silver-tinted aviator sunglasses slid down the bridge of his nose, and he looked directly into his icy blue eyes. "Yes, but for a price, of course," he said firmly. And with that, I turned around and left a bookmaker, a Dachshund, and 24 cleated co-eds to their training. And that is chapter 8 of Rolling Thunder.
Only a little dog poop?
Yes, I couldn't help myself. I had to start with the dog poop. I've actually never read that chapter before, and it's brief and it's kind of fun, and so I couldn't help myself, especially after I put on this tie. There you go.
Well, AJ uses a lot of humor in his stories, so if you want to mix a crime and humor writer, AJ Devlin's a good place to start. Now, everybody here so far has been a long-time good friend of mine. Wynonna Kent is a newest friend of mine. I didn't meet her until I just recently joined the Crime Writers Canada, and she is our regional representative. So I'm not sure if we have to call her boss or not, but she's written many, many books. I broke my rule and just bought her most recent book, Lost in Time, the Jason Davey mystery series. I don't always like starting at the end, but I'm glad I did. It's a brilliant book, really fun read. I read a lot of mystery, as you can guess, and sometimes, I can see the tricks that we do and guess pretty quickly what's going to happen, and I could not do that this time. So it's my honor to bring on Wynonna Kent.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? I'm having terrible trouble with my internet and my phone, so I'm on my phone right now. So, hi, my name is Winona Kent, and I'm the West Coast rep for the Crime Writers of Canada. I live in New Westminster. I'm not in Port Moody, and I'm a graduate of UBC with an MFA in creative writing. And I've only recently started writing mysteries. I've also written spy novels and romantic time travel novels, all while I was working full-time in a job completely unrelated to writing at UBC. I officially retired about a year ago and became a full-time writer, which I'm very happy about. So my 8th novel has just come out a couple of months ago, as was mentioned. It's called Lost Time. It's the latest in a series featuring my favorite hero, Jason Davey, who's a professional musician and amateur sleuth. And I love Jason. I don't think there are a lot of books out there featuring an amateur PI who's also a musician. Jason's parents were also musicians and were actually in a world-famous band called Figgis Green in the 1970s. So in Lost Time, Jason's mother has reunited the band for a 50th anniversary tour, and Jason is taking the place of his late father. So while he's rehearsing with the band, he's approached by a diehard fan, Duncan Stouffer, to look into the case of Pippa Gladstone, a teenage girl who went missing in 1974 and was declared dead by her mother. So Jason has to juggle his rehearsal schedule with trying to find out what actually happened to Pippa and why. So you can read the first 2 chapters on my website. It's wynnonakent.com, and you can find out more about me there as well. So I'll just quickly set this reading up. My hero is English, so you'll have to imagine me with an English accent. And also, this is written in the first person, so I am actually Jason, who's a man. So you'll have to suspend your disbelief and pretend I'm Jason, who's English. As I mentioned, Jason's rehearsing to go on tour. He's also decided to post pictures of all of his meals to his Instagram followers. He calls it his culinary chronicle. And in this scene, which is from chapter 2, he's finished rehearsing and he's having his lunch in a local coffee shop. I just arranged my lunch on the table so I could take a picture for my culinary chronicle when I was approached by a guy wearing a hand-knitted V-neck sleeveless pullover and a shirt and tie. You don't often see that nowadays, a shirt and a tie and a sleeveless pullover. I guess he was probably about my mom's age, early 70s anyway. He had very neat gray hair, combed carefully, and a pink and white face. He was carrying an old-fashioned leather school satchel. "Hello, Jason," he said. I was pretty positive I didn't know him, but that happens a lot. I perform. I'm in front of people. I enter their lives, and because of that, there's an assumed familiarity on their end anyway. "Hello," I said, doing my best to convey the impression that I was actually looking forward to an uninterrupted lunch on my own. "Duncan Stouffer," he said, sticking out his hand. I shook it. "Hello." I sat down. He remained standing. "I tried to see you this morning at the Manor, but your security guard wouldn't let me in. I'm a huge fan of Figgis Green." Did he want me to sign something? Was he going to tell me all about his extensive record collection, his sister's grandchildren, his dodgy insides? He looked the sort of person who maintained a journal about his bowel movements. "Excellent contribution this morning. Nothing today. Requires an investigation. I wanted to let you know how much I admired you for the way you tracked down Ben Quigley when he disappeared. I know you're good at solving cases involving missing people. Ah, I said, thanks. A few years earlier, Ben had traveled to Peace River, Alberta, in northern Canada, to take part in a music festival. He'd never come back, and people, my son in particular, were understandably concerned for his welfare. I'd gone there to look for him. It had taken some work, but I'd found him, rescued might be a better word, and brought him home to England. His story had ended up in all the papers, and my second-string career as a PI had been launched. I have something I think you might be interested in. Might I join you? Without waiting for me to reply, he appropriated the chair on the other side of the table. It concerns a missing girl, he said. I've approached the police, but they simply aren't interested. Why not? I asked. They're of the opinion that the young lady in question is dead. Why would they think that? She was declared legally dead by her mother a few years after she disappeared. Well, I said, that more or less closes the book on the case, really. However, they are wrong. You think they're wrong or you know they're wrong? I know they're wrong. He placed the old leather satchel he'd been carrying onto his lap, opened it, and proceeded to transfer its contents to the tabletop in neat, perfectly aligned stacks. I took a lot of photos of Figgis Green when they were at the peak of their popularity in the mid-1970s, he said. And there they all were. Some were in color, some in black and white. Each had a label affixed to the back, with meticulous printing identifying the date and location. Fairfield Halls, he said, reading them aloud. Croydon, October 1st, 1973. Brangwyn Hall, Swansea, November 13th, 1975. Sheldonian Theatre, Oxford, July 10, 1976. Yes, I understand, I said. August 1st, 1974. The Wiltshire Folk Festival. He wanted me to pay special attention to that one. Actually, there was more than one. There were 5 by 7 color photos, taken from where he must have been standing in the middle of a crowded grassy field. A stage at the far end featured Figgis Green. Behind that was a small forest, useful for damping the sound so the neighbors wouldn't complain. The Wiltshire Folk Festival had only lasted a few years, but was famous for who it attracted and how well it was organized. The Old Grey Whistle Test had done a story about it in 1972. I glanced at all of the pictures. I didn't have a lot of choice. Duncan was sliding them in front of me, one at a time, helpfully moving the plate with my baguette off to one side to accommodate them. I'd forgotten about this roll of film, he said. I'd put it away in a drawer, and then, things. Sorry. He gestured in a way that suggested his unreliable lower colon or his grandchildren's tonsils had interrupted whatever plans he'd had for that particular summer. I found it last month while I was having a clear out, and I sent it off to be developed. I'd labeled the film canister, of course, so I knew it was from the festival, but it's this which captured my attention. He held the picture up for my benefit. Pippa Gladstone. In the foreground of the photograph were a teenage boy and girl. They both had long hair. His was dark brown and shoulder length. Hers was dark blonde and wavy and hanging past her shoulders. The boy was looking away from the camera, but the girl was staring straight at it, and I noted that she had really striking blue-gray eyes. Both the boy and the girl were wearing trendy New York Yankees baseball caps, and they were dressed, like everyone around them, in rumpled Indian cotton shirts and grungy-looking bell-bottom jeans, and they both looked as if they needed a bath, which wasn't surprising, as they'd likely been camping in a nearby meadow for the better part of a week. "Who's Pippa Gladstone?" I asked.
Wow, well done.
Thank you.
And your phone held up.
I'm precariously holding my phone with one hand while I stare at the screen with another. And every time somebody read, I kept getting cut off and I kept having to come back in. So I'm glad my internet connection stayed and my phone didn't run out of battery.
Yeah, fate was with you. Fate was with you. This is easily the fastest I've ever completed 6 readers, because readers tend to read long and we didn't. So I did drop the ball a little bit, and maybe Sadie's going to mention it because there's been a lot of comments.
Yeah, I was actually just going to say that I think there were some questions as well, Eric, that came through. So if you guys wanted to, if you have the time to kind of look at the questions there. So one of them was after Wendy's reading, and it's specifically to Wendy, but I think everyone, if you guys wanted to answer it, the question is, when did you start writing? How do you stay disciplined? And do you have a favorite character?
That's 3 questions.
That is.
When did I start writing? I started writing poetry when I was, a teenager, full of angst and Yeah, I've been writing since then. How do you stay disciplined? I don't. I'm not a disciplined. I'm not a disciplined writer. I'm an intuitive writer. So when I write because I love it, and when I'm into it, I'm into it. So I might write like 8 hours at a time when I'm into it, but then I might have days where I'm not writing anything. I'm doing something else, but I'm always on. Do I have a favorite character in my books? Yes, of course. My main character is Estrada. He's the protagonist, and he's the reason I've just kept writing all the time. I can't get rid of him. I tried to write another book in the spring, and I got 30,000 words in, and then he's just started bugging me. So I ended up writing book 4, and I finished book 4, which is coming out in March. And then I wrote the other book after that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you've been inspired.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So the other question came in for all the authors, and it says, if you could meet any author, living or dead, who would it be and why?
Why don't we answer that in the order we read? It's probably easiest that way, as opposed to trying to be polite and try to figure out who's next. I saw that question earlier, so I got to think about it for a little bit. And I always like promoting local authors, but there's no point meeting a live one. So a writer who lived in BC or in Vancouver and wrote here, I don't know, 40 years ago or so, before he drank himself to death, is Malcolm Lowry. He wrote Under the Volcano, and it's one of my favorite books. He'd be fun to sit down and have a drink with. Not a mystery. Wendy?
I don't know. I was looking at my bookshelf. One of my favorite writers, I've actually met her, O.R. Melling, in Ireland, so I guess that doesn't count. I don't keep very much fiction. I'm not sure. I really don't know. Well, I think Shakespeare would be kind of fun. No, I'm serious, really. I think that would be like, I would like to time travel back to that part of time and hang out in the tavern and find out what that was all about.
You can bring him here and freak him really out.
Yeah, could write him into like a, sexy urban fantasy. Like,
he'd appreciate that.
Yeah, he would appreciate that.
Seamus?
My first instinct was any writer who read my book and could get me an agent, but that seems to be and mercenary. It might seem a little on the nose for a mystery writer, but I do have a great affinity for Raymond Chandler, not just because of his books, like The Big Sleep or Farewell, My Lovely, but his journey was really interesting to me. He actually didn't become a writer until later in life, and because he lost his job, and at that crazy time, you could do things like just start writing books and short stories and make a living off of it. Hilarious in retrospect, but at the time, it was true. It was a career aspiration, and he was kind of a sad, messed up guy in a lot of ways, but he's also prodigiously talented, and it's safe to say that. If I hadn't discovered his work, I probably wouldn't be doing this terrible job of impersonating him in this genre that he helped pioneer so badly. So there you go.
For me, there are two writers that I would love to have met, both passed long. Well, Agatha Christie is one. Yeah. Sue Grafton is the other, and I would just love to sit down with both of them over a glass of wine and discuss crime and crime writing and life and travel and people. That would be awesome.
Yeah, I got the BBC channel recently, so I've been watching all the Agatha Christie Miss Marples just back to back. I've seen them all before, but just watching them again, and she is the master. It's hard to beat that.
Yeah.
AJ?
She taught me to have a healthy respect for poisons. So
yes.
I'd have to go with a few. Joe R. Landsdeal is a huge favorite of mine. He writes these mystery comedy mojo stories set in East Texas that are just off the wall, quirky and insane, but just tell killer mysteries. Robert Cray writes about a ex-Vietnam vet turned private investigator with a sidekick, very deadly, lethal sidekick, ex-Marine Joe Pike, which is a template I kind of lifted from my series and tried to, put my own twist on it. And then of course the great Carl Heisen, who, in my opinion, is the greatest mystery comedy writer of all time. And to get around a table with those guys and pick their brains would be incredible.
Actually, what I'm most amazed about is you and I've had this discussion before, and usually it takes you about 30 minutes to answer that. Well, we're gonna run out of time.
I kept my reading short. I'm keeping my answers short. I'm trying to back you up here, buddy.
Winona?
On our free time, yeah, no, I'll yak your ear off until you're ready to fall asleep. But
I'm not 100% sure, but Wynonna may be frozen.
oh,
Is it my turn?
Oh,
Yeah.
there she is.
I hear her.
Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Hello? Here I am. Is it my turn?
Yes.
I have three favorite writers. One is John Galsworthy. Can you hear me okay?
Mhm.
One is John Galsworthy, who wrote the Forsyte Saga. And one is Monica Dickens, who's Charles Dickens' great-great-granddaughter. And
Oh.
the third one is John le Carré. And I would actually like to meet all three of them. Only one is still alive. But Monica Dickens is probably my favorite out of the three of them. Just because I read all of her books when I was quite young. And she doesn't write mysteries. She just writes regular run-of-the-mill stories that are really special. My favorite book by her is called Delirious. And she was actually instrumental in setting up the Samaritans in the United States. It's a British suicide anti-prevention group in England. And she set up the one in the US.
Oh, wow.
And she wrote a novel about it. She tended to write novels about all of her jobs that she'd ever had. And that's another thing that I liked about her. But that's who I'd love to meet.
Yeah. I know one of the questions was, what do we do for marketing? Could you imagine, going to meet publishers and agents for the first time? You're like, yeah, Charles Dickens, my great-great-dad. That would help.
Yeah.
Yeah. She had a bit of a leg up there, I think.
Yeah.
So there is another question that came in. If you guys are open to answering another one here.
Sure.
So Gail is wondering, if you were not writing in the mystery genre, what other genre or style would you try? I'll repeat that. So if you were not writing in the mystery genre, what other genre or style would you try?
Actually, I'm already working in a different genre right now. I wanted to stretch myself creatively, so I have been working on an urban fantasy, and it's been on and off for a couple of years, but since I retired from my day job, I'm working on it every day, and I'm finding the world of monsters of a different supernatural kind quite interesting compared to the human monsters that we write about in crime fiction. And it's a wonderful challenge, and I almost feel like a beginning writer again, because there's aspects of the fantasy that are quite different from a straight crime novel. So luckily I have a great group of critiquers who are giving me some fabulous insights into that, and reading and studying a lot of other fantasies, because it is its own, and it's great fun. I'm really, really enjoying it. It's really challenging, but I love it. So that's what I'm up to.
Yeah, I'd say the smart thing to do if you're trying to sell novels is to stick to your genre. But the artist side of you always pulls you to try new things. So I have written memoir before. I'm writing my grandmother's biography sort of as a passion project on the side. I used to dabble in poetry until I met some of the poets at the Port Moody Writers Group, and I completely stopped after that. That's really hard. And I like to dabble, and I think a lot of people like to dabble. Writers don't stay in their lanes all the time. Artists don't stay in their lanes all the time.
Well, I used to be a journalist, so I'd probably go back to that. I actually just wrote an article about food in Canadian prisons and how the system, which was changed in 2014, is completely failing the people who are incarcerated right now. So I'd like to go back to long form feature writing, or even something like writing a longer book on a topic of criminal justice reform.
Wow.
Yeah, no joke there. Sorry. I feel like I should have some like a witty rejoinder to wrap that up. Wait, I can find, sorry. Let me try that again. I'd be a journalist because then I could be rejected in a whole other industry. There you go. There you go. Phew, that was close. With emotional sincerity there for a moment.
I would probably shake things up and go in, only because I happen to know this story firsthand. I would go and try and write a biography. My dad, he played in he was on the men's national team for Canadian men's basketball from 72 to 76, and he played in Montreal Olympics, where Canada finished fourth, which was actually their highest finish ever in the Olympics. And there was a player on the team, his name was Billy Robinson, and he was the Steve Nash of the 70s, and he was probably the greatest pure shooter that Canada ever produced. But at the time, there was no three-point line. If there was a three-point line when he played, he would have gone on to the NBA without question. And he had just a remarkable career, and he was just a rock star on the court and off the court. And I've heard so many stories from so many people over the years. And I just think that'd be fun. That'd be a fun project to tackle. It'd be completely different. It'd be a completely different challenge. It'd be a tremendous amount of research, but yeah, but that'd be something I'm passionate about, and I'd get to hang out with my dad and just hear stories and try and capture this guy's life. That would be something I would probably, if I weren't so focused on mysteries right now, that's something I would probably want to do, to take a crack at.
Well, I just spent the last 6 months writing a romance, a mainstream romance.
I actually am late to mysteries, as I mentioned before.
Okay. Are you?
So I think we're cutting in and out a little bit.
My internet is weird. Sorry.
Back to you.
Carry on.
Okay. So I just spent 6 months writing a small town romance that's mainstream, an actual guy and a girl with a happily ever after. I know this is a real departure for me, but I seem to have, since I moved to the country, softened around the edges a little bit. Not just my middle section, but I've softened a little bit. So I've quite enjoyed writing this. It's a place called Lure River, and it's set in the middle of Minnesota, and I'm having a lot of fun with that. So that's finished and going to an editor soon, and then I've got another one that's kind of set in Nootka that's similar. I mean, the one in Lure River, there is a body, I will say, that I can't. I'm sorry, a hand turned up one day out of the mud. What can I say? It just was there. And then there's also a type of romance suspense that I'm working on the west coast of Canada that I'm about halfway done. So I'm making a bit of a segue into the romance market, and we'll just see how that goes. And in terms of genres, as you guys know, I flip genres all over the place. So I write urban fantasy. There's a lot of poetry in it. It's murder mystery. Part of the series is thrillers. There's vampires, there's fairies. It's whatever happens. So this was interesting. Just trying to really stick to boy, girl. Yeah.
Well, I think romance outsells mystery about 3-1, so it's probably not a bad career move.
Mhm.
You know what? Well, that's a good way to look at it, because it would be nice to retire one day and actually, right.
I'm not sure if, Sadie, if you could tell, I'm not sure if Wendy's still here.
No, you're looking for
Winona.
Oh, sorry, not Wendy. Sorry, Winona. Sorry.
She's just reconnecting here. Let me add her back in.
There she is.
Perfect timing.
Hi, I'm so sorry. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
You can, okay. I was just going to, as I mentioned before, I'm fairly new to mystery. This is my second, and I wrote a novella for that. But before that, I've written an adventure story set on a cruise ship in Alaska. I wrote 3 accidental time romance, time travel, 2 spy novels that were very tongue-in-cheek. So I've landed in after exploring all those other genres. I'm sorry I keep disappearing.
Your timing's always perfect. Almost.
Well, we might have time for one more speed round question here. So the last question that came in is, what do you like to read in your spare time?
All right, I think it worked best when we stepped to the order. So why don't we do that again? I'll go first, and we'll go in order, and then we all know when we have to speak. In my spare time, I pretty much read you guys. I read a lot of BC authors, partially because I'm a publisher and because I like to promote BC authors, but partially because I think there's a lot of really good authors that many of whom live within walking distance of my house. So I've read every word of most of the people here. I've got to catch up on Winona, and I'm a little behind on Wendy's, but I will. I read mostly BC authors. So Wendy?
Okay. I just actually read Virgin River. It's on Netflix right now, but I actually read the book, which is completely different than what's on Netflix. But I normally, and that's just because I'm writing a romance, so I've started to read romances. But I often read Canadian authors as well, because I'm a reviewer for the Ottawa Review of Books online. And so I get a lot of books mailed to me. And so I know I have Dietrich Kelties's new book sitting on my shelf ready to be read. But sorry, Dietrich, I read Virgin River first. So it just depends what comes in. So I kind of have a stack, and I've got one of AJ's waiting as well. To be done. So I mix it up, and
Seamus?
I am a big fan of short fiction. Some of the writers that I fell in love with when I was younger were guys like Raymond Carver and Chekhov. And I just finished a collection edited by James Elroy of like the all-time best noir crime short stories over the last 100 years. Him and Otto Penzler put that together. It was pretty good, if a bit grim. I also like, I'm a big sports fan, so I read a lot of sports books. I just finished a book about the 1968 baseball season and how the parallel between the race to the World Series was going up against civil unrest in the United States. I really, really enjoyed that. Jackie Robinson played a big part in the book despite being retired. I also have a 15-month son, so I read a lot of Little Blue Truck, Dr. Seuss, Edward, is it Monk? What's that guy's name? Murmel.
Robert Munsch.
Yeah. I'm gonna give a hot take right now. That guy's really overrated. I don't see the appeal. There's not really a clear beginning, middle, or end, or satisfying yet surprising conclusion. I don't know.
You should be a critic for children's literature.
Yeah. That's at least the biggest market is crime fiction. So let's go.
Deborah?
Oh, Seamus just reminded me of I have a new granddaughter, and she's almost 4 months. So I have been reading these baby books. C is for Cookie Monster, A is for Abby, and all that stuff. But for myself, I'm also reading a lot of indie authors, independently published authors from all over in all genres. Like Wendy, I read a real mixed bag of all kinds of things, and I'm love some of the YA young adult novels that are being written today. Big fan of the classics. Somebody mentioned Chandler, and Dashiell Hammett has always been a favorite of mine. So historical fiction mysteries, historical fantasies, and just pure historical fiction, just as much as I can. And then once in a while I go right into the dark side, and I read read these nonfiction books about food shortages in the world and all these kinds of things. So I try and read some nonfiction and figure out what's going on out there and the things that we don't necessarily hear in mass media every day. So it's a real mix. So
I should say, and Sadie, if you don't mind me plugging you, you guys should, Seamus and Deborah, you give yourself a break. Tune into the Port Moody Library's Facebook page in the daytime, and you can get the librarians to read to your children and grandchildren and take a little break.
Great idea.
Tuesdays and Wednesdays, live videos, 10:30 a.m. And then Fridays, we have a pre-recorded one.
Perfect. Will you be available next year too?
Yeah, we probably will. Might not be the same schedule, but we probably will.
Okay, I'm marking it on my calendar.
Thank you, Eric, for the promo.
You scratch my back, I scratch yours.
There you go.
AJ?
To echo what you said about reading BC authors. I spent 6-7 years in Los Angeles when I was in university and getting my screenwriting degrees, and I read exclusively American authors. And then I came home, and then got published, and then I started doing like these Writers in Our Midst events and Noir at the Bar events, and you meet all these incredible people. I met this handsome ginger son of a gun over here, one in particular. And I read his book in a day and a half when you're looking over your shoulder for it. I took it to a vacation with my family to Osoyoos. I read it in a day. I just tore through it. And I still have I've read everybody here on screen. There's people like Judy Taves, or Rachel Greenaway, like there's Sam Weeb, Sheena Kamal. I mean, we're just spoiled with how much talent there is in British Columbia in particular, but also across Canada. And I think that's really important. I think it's really important to prioritize Canadian crime fiction first, and not to knock American crime fiction or European crime fiction, but we are, Vancouver Noir from Akashic Books was just came out, and it was an amalgam of short stories, and Linda Richards, I think, won the Arthur Ellis for best short story from that. And so there's just so much amazing crime fiction right now in Canada and British Columbia in particular that I can never seem to catch up. I mean, I'm always trying, but when I get a moment, I'm just trying to move on to that next book, that next series, and yeah, it's pretty exciting time to be reading British Columbia Canadian crime fiction right now.
What am I reading? I'm reading about 6 things at once. A bad habit I picked up when I was doing my literature, because you had to read like 3 novels at once in every single class that you took. So I'm reading both of AJ's novels. I'm reading a book of short stories that the Sisters in Crime just put out that I'm in. I'm reading the biography of Tom Steele, British entertainer, and also Barbara Windsor, another British entertainer. So that's what I'm reading right now. And the internet connection is still really bad. I just moved over to where my modem is, and it's still bad. So I apologize.
One of the downsides of virtual programming, unfortunately. Well, I just want to say thank you so much to Eric, and thank you so much to all of our authors, Deborah, AJ, Winona, Seamus, Wendy. It was such a pleasure to listen to all of you read tonight. It will definitely add many more books to my to-read list, which is ever growing and never shrinking. So thank you so much. Thank you so much to everyone who is tuning in, everyone who has made comments and asked questions tonight. It was a big pleasure. And Eric, if you want to say any final words, please go ahead as well.
No, I think I'm all talked out. So thank you everyone for coming.
Right.
Thank you everyone for reading tonight. It was a lot of fun. I think we walked the line a little bit, but hopefully we can do some more of these.
We always enjoy having you. So once again, from the Port Moody Public Library, thank you to everyone watching, and thank you to all of our authors tonight. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you, everybody.